Everyone told you being smart was a gift. And in many ways, it is. But nobody told you about the other side, the part where your brain never really turns off, where thinking deeply about everything is not always a superpower and sometimes feels more like a sentence. This video is not going to tell you that you are secretly a genius. It is going to tell you something more honest than that, what it actually costs to have a mind that never stops, and why that cost is almost never talked about. Let us start with something that is genuinely true. High intelligence is associated with real advantages, better problem solving, faster pattern recognition, higher lifetime earnings on average. That part is real and documented. But here is what the same research also shows, and what almost nobody talks about. The very thing that makes a mind work faster and deeper also makes it harder to turn the volume down on everything. Psychologists call it overexcitability, a term introduced by Polish psychiatrist Kazimierz Dabrowski in the 1960s to describe people whose nervous systems respond more intensely to stimulation, any stimulation, sound, light, emotion, thought. The nervous system does not filter. It amplifies. In 2018, psychologist Ruth Karpinski and her team at Pitzer College surveyed members of Mensa, people with IQs in the top 2% of the population. What they found surprised even the researchers. More than 26% of the Mensa members reported being diagnosed with a mood disorder. The national average at the time was around 10%. 20% reported an anxiety disorder, again, double the national average. Allergies? Triple. The pattern was consistent across almost every condition they measured. Now, and this is important, that study has limitations. The Mensa sample was self-selected. People who join a high IQ society may differ from other high IQ individuals in ways beyond just intelligence. So we cannot say high IQ causes these conditions. But what the data does tell us is that for many people who think deeply and intensely, these experiences are real. And they are far more common than the conversation around intelligence usually admits. So what does this actually feel like? It feels like lying awake at 2 a.m., not because something is wrong, but because your brain found a problem worth solving and decided that was more important than sleep. It feels like replaying a conversation from 3 years ago and noticing something you missed the first time. It feels like being the first person in the room to sense that something is off, and also the last person to be able to explain why. It feels like caring too much about things other people seem to move past effortlessly, like a sense of injustice that does not go away after the moment has passed, like finishing a movie and still thinking about it 3 days later while everyone else has moved on to the next thing. And here is the part that rarely gets said. This is not just in your head. Literally, Karpinski and her colleagues proposed what they called the hyperbrain, hyperbody theory. The idea that the same nervous system that processes information more intensely also responds more intensely to the physical world. Higher rates of allergies, asthma, autoimmune conditions. The brain and body share the same wiring. And when the wiring is turned up, everything is turned up. And the third thing, the one that is possibly the hardest, is the loneliness of it. Not the loneliness of having no one around, but the loneliness of being around people and still feeling like you are watching from slightly outside the frequency everyone else is on. Because the way your mind works, the speed of it, the depth of it, that can make ordinary conversations feel like they are happening in a different language. One you understand, but are not quite fluent in anymore. Now here is where it gets complicated and important. None of this means that everyone with a sharp mind is suffering, or that intelligence is somehow a burden to escape. Research is genuinely mixed. Some studies find protective effects, some find increased risk. The truth is that this is individual. What is consistent is that the experience of thinking intensely is rarely discussed with honesty. So here is the question nobody asks. Not are you smart, but what does thinking this way actually cost you? Not in a dramatic sense, just what does it feel like at the end of a long day when your brain has been going full speed since you woke up and the world expects you to just switch off? If the answer is, honestly, not much, then you have found a way to work with your mind rather than against it. That is not nothing. That is actually something worth understanding. If the answer is closer to exhausting, constant, like carrying something nobody else can see, that is worth paying attention to. Not fixing, not spiraling, just noticing. The research also points to something useful here. The same overexcitability that makes things harder also correlates with deeper empathy, stronger creative thinking, and what some psychologists call existential intelligence, the ability to sit with big, uncomfortable questions without needing an immediate answer. But that does not cancel out the harder parts. And this is where most conversations about intelligence stop. They either celebrate it or they pathologize it. What psychology is beginning to understand is that it is neither. It is a particular way of being in the world with real gifts and real costs. And the cost part deserves to be named. So, if any of this felt familiar, the 2am brain, the replayed conversations, the frequency no one else seems to be on, you are not broken. You are not dramatic. You are not too sensitive. You are just wired in a way that the world does not always have language for. And that is a harder thing to carry than most people will ever understand. Being wired this way is not a flaw, but it is also not the gift that everyone tells you it is. It is just a different kind of weight. And knowing that the weight has a name makes it slightly easier to carry. That is what this channel is for. If you want content that tells you the truth about how the mind actually works, not just the flattering parts, you know what to do.